Hello Internet, so nice to see you. One of my biggest pet peeves in music theory is how we name the intervals. It's like someone picked on purpose the most confusing and less practical option. Now, if you are among the confused too, maybe this video will help you. And if instead you are not confused, maybe this video will show you why you should be. I already posted a video on an introduction to intervals, so if you are a beginner and know nothing about intervals, go and see that one first. Otherwise, keep going here. But very briefly, let's review just the basics in just a minute. In our Western equal temperament system, we have 12 notes. 7 are called natural, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then we have 5 altered notes that are indicated with the use of the sharps and flat symbols. Why this is done this way? It's a completely different can of worms, which I'm not gonna touch right now. Now, if we play two notes in music, the most important thing that tells us how those two notes sound together is their distance, and this is what we call the interval. The interval is just a way to measure the distance between two notes, and it tells us how they sound. How do we measure this interval? Well, all the notes I wrote here are at the exact same distance with each other. That is, the distance between C and C sharp is the same distance between C sharp and D, is the same distance between D and D sharp, and so on and so forth. It would seem natural to simply count how many of those there are from one note to another. It would also seem natural to call this thing a step, but wait, in music, this distance is not called a step, it's called a half step or a semitone. Well, whatever, it's just a name. So let's say if you want to measure the distance between C and E, it would be natural to call this interval 4 half step. Or let's just say that the interval is 4, right? Wrong. That would be too simple. This 4 here is what we will call the chromatic interval, because all those notes here form what we call the chromatic scale, and the chromatic scale includes all the notes that we have. But that's not what we do in music most of the time. In music, we do something different. We measure the distance between two notes in the scale, inside the scale. And in this case, I'm gonna pick the C major scale, so just the natural notes, C, D, E, F, G, A, B. And then I measure the distance between C and E using only these notes, as if the other notes did not exist. And I'm gonna call this the diatonic interval, where diatonic in this specific case means in the scale, or just the interval. Let's see how a rational person will do that. If I call the distance between two notes in the scale 1 step, then the distance between C and E will be 2 steps. Or we could just say that the interval is 2, right? Wrong again. Here's how music theorists measure the interval between C and E. They write the notes C, D, and E. They look at these, they see that there are 3 notes on the paper, and so we call this distance between C and E the interval of a third. If instead you were measuring the distance between C and A, you will write down all those notes, C, D, E, F, G, A, count that there are 6 notes and call this the interval of a sixth, and so on and so forth. Now, this is how intervals are defined in music, but this is a problem on 2 different accounts. First of all, if C to E is a third, then also E to G is a third. I write down E, F, and G, there are 3 notes, it's a third too. But if I go back and look at what happens in the chromatic scale, from C to E I have 4 half steps. From E to G I have 3 half steps. This is very well known in music, and indeed we will call C to E a major third and E to G a minor third, precisely to indicate that those 2 thirds are not exactly the same. Well, that's admittedly confusing at first, but honestly, it turns out that there are reasons to do this, and that eventually, when you use those intervals to build chords and to actually make music, it makes sense to use major thirds and minor thirds. And to give you an example, I'm just linking this a video on how chords are built. So that's not great, that's not amazing, but it's okay, we can work with that. But I said that this was a problem on two different accounts. And this second account is the one that, in my opinion, creates the most problems. So let's measure the interval between C and G. I write down C, D, E, F, G. I count 5 notes, so this is the interval of a fifth. So far, so good. This is correct based on the music theory we know. Now, let me write down those 3 notes. C, E, and G. The distance between C and E is a third. The distance between E and G is a third. And the distance between C and G, you've just seen, it's a fifth. Or, in other words, in music theory, 3 plus 3, it's equal 5. Oh dear. This is even more confusing than biology, where 1 plus 1 is 3. Now notice how this problem will not be happening if we were measuring the intervals in one of the other ways I've shown before. If we were thinking inside the scale and measuring the intervals in steps, C to E it's 2 steps, E to G is 2 steps, C to G it's 4 steps, and even if all those steps are not exactly the same, because sometimes they are 1/2 step long and sometimes they are 2/2 steps long, but still 2 plus 2 will be 4. And if we were measuring these in the chromatic scale, well, C to E has a distance of 4/2 steps, E to G at a distance of 3/2 steps, C to G has a distance of 7/2 steps, 4 plus 3 is 7, everything would have worked perfectly. So, why are we using this notation here? Why are we making it this confusing? I mean, after all, the only point of using numbers to measure intervals is because with numbers we can do operations with them. We can add them, subtract them, multiply them, divide them. But here we break the system immediately by creating a kind of a strange mathematic where 3 plus 3 is 5, which is at least anti-intuitive and kinda defeats the purpose of having a measure of an interval that we can use. I mean, if I cannot use those numbers to do any kind of operation intuitively, then I might as well call those intervals using colors: the red interval, the yellow interval, the orange interval, the green interval, and so on and so forth. Also, this creates an interesting situation where the distance between a C note and the very same C note, it's not 0, as you would expect, but it's a first. Guys, we could have done this much better, no? Why we are using this kind of notation? Why we pick the less intuitive and less practical thing? Who did this and why? Well, we have actually no idea, as far as I know, of who invented the interval system. Now, I am no music historian, but I did research this thing a little bit, and the first reference I can find to this kind of interval system come from the 1600s. I could not find any reference in the 1500s, so it's reasonable for me, at least right now, to assume that this system was invented pretty much in those years. Maybe one of my viewers here is a music historian. Maybe some of you have more knowledge than that. In this case, I beg you, write it in the comment. I really want to know. If you know who invented this, if you know why they invented this, if you know when this was invented, any information is good, but please write a source because I really want to check it and see what is happening here. As for the why the system is done this way, I don't see any advantage to this system, except maybe that since it's hard for beginners to learn, we can use it to distinguish who is a beginner and who is not. If you are confused by this system, it means that you are not a real musician. But except for that, I can actually see one small advantage to that. We have to remember that in the 1600s, we were starting writing music using counterpoint, and I can see how, if you write counterpoint, it can be useful to know how long a scale run will be with a given starting and ending note. So for instance, if my starting note is C and my ending note is A, and I want to play all the notes in between, so I have a scale run, C, D, E, F, G, A, the interval between C and A is a sixth, and so my scale run is 6 notes long. I can see how this could be an advantage to think this way, rather than thinking that the distance between C and A is 5 steps when you have 6 notes in the run. So if you write music using only counterpoint and you're not thinking about what's going to happen in the future because the future has not happened yet, so you have no idea what's going to happen in the next centuries of musical development, I can see how it could make sense to define intervals this way, because you are calculating the length of those scale runs more often than doing other things. And at this point in music, chord did not exist yet, they were not discovered at least. So I can see how, in that situation, this could be a natural way to measure intervals. I mean, it's an hypothesis, and if you tell me that it's weak, maybe you're right, but right now I don't see any other advantage to this specific system that we are still using. If you do see an advantage to that, or if you have an idea why this happened, please write down in the comment. I really want to hear your opinion on this, because honestly, this is baffling me. It makes absolutely no sense. We could have had a much better interval system, less confusing, more practical. But this interval system here has been in use now for 400 years, and I don't think there's any hope of changing it. All our music literature, all the jargon between musicians, we all use this system, we all understand each other using this system. I don't think there's any hope of changing it. This happens also to a few other things in music theory. So if you find music theory confusing, this is not you. It may be that the system is actually objectively confusing and not as functional as it may be. So when you learn music theory, there may be a little part of confusion that you cannot eliminate. But if you want to learn harmony on your guitar with the absolute minimum of confusion, so that everything is clear, everything is explained, and you have somebody taking you by hand and bringing you in this wonderful world of harmony and music theory, then I recommend you check out my course, Complete Chord Mastery. This course has been made by guitar players for guitar players. All the harmony we do here, it's applied immediately on your fretboard, so that everything is immediately applicable, immediately practical. You can use it immediately. And everything is explained step by step. Here you learn both the principle behind it and a metric ton of examples for every single thing that we learn. So you learn how to play it, you learn how it sounds, and you learn how to use it in your own music. If you have just a minute, check out Complete Chord Mastery at the link on the top right. If you like this video, smash on that like button, don't forget to subscribe and click on notification, otherwise YouTube will not let you know when I put up a new video. And if you have any comment, feedback, suggestion, or you know why we use this completely broken interval system, then write it down in the comments. I'm curious to hear from you. This is Tommaso Zillio of musictheoryforguitar.com. And until next time, enjoy.